Welcome back everyone to Card Combo Show episode 31 with me, Chocobilly, where I look at weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week I'm going to be looking at Carbuncle from Opus 5, Gilgamesh from Opus 12, Nono from Opus 10, ROSA from Opus 11, and BORGHEN from Opus 12, so a lot more recent cards this week. Okay, so starting with Carbuncle, bit of a weird summon. Choose one forward, it gains plus 2,000 power until the end of the turn. If its power has become 9,000 power or less, return Carbuncle to your hand. So you can kind of look at it as you're paying 1 CP for every 1,000 power increase. So to be able to reduce Carbuncle's cost is well worth it, but also the fact that if you can combine that with casting Carbuncle a couple of times, you can get a lot of value out of it. So combining this with the likes of Graviton, it means that one cast of Carbuncle can give one forward plus 4,000 power, which means that you can take a tiny little 3k, 4k forward into something far more formidable, which can then block and hopefully kill something. Or if you cast Carbuncle and then you were to apply the Graviton buff, and that would take the forward over 9,000 power, you can choose two different forwards if you want. So Terra, when you cast a summon, choose one for opponent controls, dull it. So basically the fact that you can cast Carbuncle, it come back to your hand and then choose to recast it again if you want, that combined with the fact that Terra will be dulling things out of the way is quite useful. Now obviously if you're casting Carbuncle to buff your forwards, that's probably due to the fact that you want to block or attack with something, but still getting the multiple dulls off of Terra basically means that you're casting Carbuncle and you get multiple dulls, so even if you don't care about the buff, being able to dull things out of the way, either on your opponent's attack phase or when you go to attack, it's still super useful. It adds that kind of nice element of being able to push through without having to worry about power. Ramza. So again, if you were to cast Carbuncle twice, that is 4 CP you've paid, but when Ramza becomes 10k, he gains haste, and when Ramza attacks, choose one forward of 3 or less your opponent controls, break it. Now obviously, if you don't have any forwards on the field, Ramza will still cost you 6 CP. But let's say you did have some forwards there, and they've now gone for whatever reason, and Ramza is just a standard 6k forward on the field. You can cast Carbuncle, he becomes an 8k, Carbuncle comes back to your hand, you can cast Carbuncle again, and then Ramza is then a 10k, and then he can attack and hopefully break a forward of 3 or less. Obviously, if you combine this with the likes of Graviton, it means that Carbuncle and Graviton will then make him a 10k off-right, but Carbuncle, you'd want to come back to your hand. Garnet. So again, it's all about the fact that you can recast Carbuncle. So when you cast a summon, place one summon counter on Garnet. So you cast Carbuncle, you get a counter on Garnet, you can then put Carbuncle back in your hand, cast it again. Obviously you won't be able to cast Carbuncle on Garnet because she becomes a 10k and then Carbuncle wouldn't return to your hand. But you can cast on a couple of more forwards, and you know, there could be something small like little 2 CP Porum. You can keep on casting on her and keep on adding more counters to Garnet. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're actually getting something useful out of the Carbuncle, because if all you're doing is paying 2 CP just to gain a counter on Garnet, at the end of the day, remove on summon counter from Garnet, choose on forward you control against plus 2,000 power to the end of the turn. So the exact same thing as Carbuncle, but it's a nice way to be able to cast Carbuncle, get it back to your hand, and then you could use that counter you've put on Garnet to then gain another 2k buff as well. So you're still gaining plus 4 for effectively casting Carbuncle. Yunalesca. So at the moment, she is the only real way to be able to reduce the cost of Carbuncle, or the most playable way to be able to reduce the cost of Carbuncle. There are some other ways, but they're kind of awkward. But yeah, having Yunalesca, just Yunalesca alone, means that Carbuncle becomes a 1 CP, and the fact that you can then just keep on paying 1 CP for a 2k buff on some of the smaller forwards and make them far more formidable. Ash. So obviously, if you control 6 or more characters, Ash gains plus 2,000 power, and Ash cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. So that's good, because of the fact even if Ash is a 7k forward, you can cast Carbuncle on her, she becomes a 9k, you still get the card back to hand, but at the end of each of your turns, if you've cast 3 or more cards this turn, draw 1 card. So let's say hypothetically you played Ash onto the field, you then cast Carbuncle onto Ash, and then you cast Carbuncle again onto Ash, you've cast 3 cards that turn, so you get to draw a card. Now it's a little silly that to go that far, but It means that Carbuncle can be cast a couple of times and work alongside Ash's ability, and it can make some of your smaller forwards, more of your smaller forwards, bigger. So you could have a couple of 5k forwards on the field, you cast Carbuncle on one, comes back to hand, cast Carbuncle on the other, comes back to hand, and maybe you played one of those forwards that turn, which means you've cast 3 cards that turn, Ash gets you a card. Soldier 3rd class. So you could cast Carbuncle 2 times onto this little guy and it would come back to hands, but the fact that it is a first striker makes him quite powerful. Soldier 3rd class is actually a pretty decent card for defensive maneuvers, so you could cast something like Ifrita, and then that's 2k done to your, or 3k done to your opponent's board, and then Soldier can block, but being able to actually buff himself makes him a lot better. Just applying damage to the field can be mitigated in some ways. So making it so that Soldier 3rd class actually becomes bigger is really useful. And again, if you can reduce Carbuncle's cost and make it only cost 1 CP, and then you cast it twice on Soldier 3rd class, that's super useful. Gilgamesh. So, put Gilgamesh into the break zone, choose 1 forward, break it, dull, search for 1 card named Enkidu, play it onto the field dull, or pay 3 lightning and 2 colorless, choose 1 damaged forward, break it. He's a 5 CP, 9k forward. So he's fairly on curve and got a lot of good abilities. He is, if you want him to be, a just 5k break anything, which is super useful. Well, I say break anything, can't get around certain cards like Fel Thanos, but kill most things. But there are some really cool combos with this card. So, Luna Freya. You could play Gilgamesh on your turn and then go to your opponent's phase, and if during your opponent's turn, when a forward other than Light or Dark you control is put from the field into the break zone, you may put Luna Freya into the break zone. If you do so, play the forward placed in the break zone onto the field dull. So you could have played Gilgamesh your last turn, and then your opponent's attack phase comes around, or doesn't even have to go to attack phase, you can just put Gilgamesh into the break zone, break a forward. You put Luna Freya into the break zone to bring Gilgamesh back, and then because it doesn't matter that Gilgamesh has only just come onto the field, because just putting something into the break zone doesn't require haste because it's no dull ability involved. Or no dull icon involved, sorry. Yeah, you can put Luna Freya into the break zone, bring Gilgamesh back, put him back into the break zone, and you've killed 2 forwards, which is really useful. Now, you do have to worry about the fact that you have sacked a backup as well, and a forward, but if you look at it as you pay 5 and break a backup to break 2 of your opponent's forwards, that's not the worst thing in the world. And you can also incorporate a block into that as well, so your opponent could attack, you block, and then you break Gilgamesh. So, Glorka and Mutsuki. So, that's a bit of a weird combo, but obviously Glorka can reduce the cost of Gilgamesh, making him a 4 CP forward, and then Mutsuki has the text, when a forward your opponent controls is put from the field into the break zone, activate Mutsuki. So it means that you can pay 4 for Gilgamesh, put him in the break zone immediately, break one of your opponent's forwards, and then reactivate your Mutsuki as well, which means that you have only paid 3 CP really for Gilgamesh, which is super useful, and to be able to only pay 3 CP just to break any forward is really, really good. Anima. So there's a lot of ways you can incorporate this, but if you've got Anima on the field, and these two are just a classic pairing, but when a forward opponent controls is put from the field into the break zone, choose one forward opponent controls, dull it. So you could combine this with Luna Freya, for example. So you put Gilgamesh into the break zone, you break something, you dull something else, use Luna Freya to bring him back, put him into the break zone again, you break something else, you dull something else. So you can effectively take out 4 things to stop them from attacking, or blocking if you need, using these 2 and Luna Freya. It's also worth noting, actually, that you can use Anima's ability of just choose one forward opponent controls, deal it 2,000 damage. You can only use this ability once per turn, to be able to then combo into Gilgamesh's pay 5 to break a damage forward. Now, paying 5 to break a damage forward is a bit steep, but sometimes needs must, and being able to break something just like that is really useful, and the fact that Anima costs 0 is awesome as well. Edward, so a 4 CP backup, so he's a bit steep, but during your opponent's attack phase, when a forward you control is put from the field to the break zone, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. So you can really pour salt into the wound by putting Gilgamesh into the break zone, breaking a forward, and then they also have to discard a card. Now, I've said it once, but I'll say it again. If you combine this with Luna Freya, it means that you put him into the break zone. Actually, you know what? Let's combine this with Luna Freya and Anima, just to go for it. So you put Gilgamesh into the break zone, you break a forward, use Luna Freya to bring him back, you also get to dull something with Anima, and they have to discard a card because of Edward. You then put Gilgamesh into the break zone again, you get to break one of their forwards, you get to dull something, and you get to make them discard a card, all for just putting Gilgamesh into the break zone. Obviously, you need the planets to align for that sort of thing to happen, but I want to see it happen. That would be hilarious. Perhaps I'm going to make a deck about this, actually, because this is funny. But either way, just this combo together together alone is pretty horrible. The fact that you just get to make your opponent discard a card just through breaking Gilgamesh and breaking some of their forwards. Ramza. So when a forward you control is put from field to the break zone, activate Ramza. Dull, choose a forward against haste until the end of the turn, or Dull, choose one forward against plus 1000 power till the end of the turn. So the fact that you can put Gilgamesh onto the field, maybe you've used Glaka to make his cost come a bit less, you could then use Ramza to give him haste. Gilgamesh attacks, you can then put Gilgamesh into the break zone to activate Ramza, and you've broken a forward as well, and then Ramza could attack as well, or give something else haste, or power, whatever. Ultimately, the fact that Gilgamesh can have haste as well and attack, and that still allows Ramza to be able to attack as well, and you break something, is really cool. Okay, no. I don't use TikTok, but I'm so sick of that song. Yeah, PTSD just seeing this card. Anyway, when a category 12 forward enters your field, choose one backup you control, activate it. So a relatively simple card and simple premise, but it can have some devastating consequences. So Tilika, obviously you can use Tilika as well to reduce the cost of the characters you want to play by 1 as well. So you're regaining a CP from playing, and you're also reducing the cost by 1. Ash, so hypothetically you could use it on this card, you make it so Ash only costs 1, you play her onto the field, Nono reactivates, so you've paid nothing for her effectively except for the card out of hand. But either way, Ash is obviously a great card because she becomes a bit cheaper through Nono's effect, but it also means that if you're in a 12 tribal deck, being able to play loads of 12 cards onto the field means that Ash is far more likely to trigger her ability to draw you a card as well. And then you've got this Ash. So again, you could combine this with Tilika to make her only a 3 CP forward, and then one of Ash's abilities, so you can play this in your main phase 1, play Ash onto the field, you go to your attack phase, even if you're not going to attack, you can then use her abilities of draw 1 card, discard 1 card, or 4 forwards gain something, or choose 1 character, activate it, so you get to activate a backup. So with this Ash and Nono, you can activate 2 backups from playing Ash. Pretty decent. Drace and Larsa. So, I mean, these two barely got played even when they came out. I mean, obviously that's not the original Larsa, but still, I really like Drace. I think it's a fun card to play, but if you control a card named Larsa, the cost to play Drace on the field is reduced by 2, it cannot become 0, and then if you control card named Larsa, Drace gains plus 2000 power and first strike, so it becomes an 8k first striker that costs 1. Obviously, its cost cannot become 0, but it can technically, because you pay the 1, with a backup to play Drace into the field, and then Nono can reactivate that backup as well. And if you've got Larsa there as well, Larsa's a fairly easy backup to have. Now obviously you would have to be in wind, lightning, water for this to happen, which is really weird, but you know, weirder things have happened. And all of those colours do fall nicely into 12's synergy. Like you've got Gramus is a 12 searcher and he is a lightning backup. Worst possible element for him to be in, but the point still stands. Baralai, here we go. This is really the reason I wanted to talk about this card. So, when 1 or more dull backup you control is activated due to your summons or abilities, deal it 3000 damage to all the forwards your opponent controls. And then I don't care about the other things. The rest of his ability. Baralai is a decent enough card just through that reactivation effect. Now, it's worth noting, because I've seen a few people get confused about this, is that Baralai doesn't deal 3000 damage to all your opponent's forwards for every backup you reactivate. It's only for every instance of backups being reactivated. So what I mean by that is there is the 5 cost Opus 1 Varn. When he attacks, you can reactivate 2 backups, or there is, I can't remember her card or her name, but I will insert her into the video through magics, but she reactivates, what's her name, Adele? It's not Adele, is it Adele? It's not Adele, it's the other one, but you know who I mean. She can reactivate 3 backups when she attacks as well. That still only does 3k damage to your opponent's board, because when it reads, when 1 or more dull backups you control is activated, so it's just a case of backups being reactivated. Now, hypothetically, if you were to attack with that card that I can't remember, or Varn, and have the other Nono on your backup lineup, there'll be multiple backups being reactivated, but they're triggered through 2 separate abilities, so then that would be 2 lots of 3k being dealt. But that doesn't matter, because Baralai with this Nono means anytime you play a 12 card, you can just deal 3k to your opponent's board. Oh, sorry, it's a 12 forward, obviously, so you won't be reactivating backups through playing backups on monsters. But you could play something like Ash, he's only effectively costing you 1, that reactivates a backup, 3k to your board. And then you could use something like Pandemonium, which is a summon, but obviously that's 2k to your opponent's board, probably. And then you get to reactivate a backup, that then deals another 3k to your opponent's board. And you could be reactivating, say, backup Penelo as well, who can deal 1k to your opponent's board if you're at 3 damage. So, you know, there's lots of nice ways to be able to combo these cards into a 12 deck. You could also play the, again, the 5 cost Varn from Opus 1 to be able to bring Barrelite onto the field to cheat him in. There's also Water Geese. I think he's Opus 2, or it might be 1, 2, or 3, I can't remember now. When he enters, you get to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, but again, he can also play Barrelite onto the field as well, which is useful if you aren't in ice at all. A nice way to be able to cheat him into just a water or ice, wind deck with Nono. Yeah, so Penelo works nicely into that as well, as I already stated. Geomancer, so being able to reactivate a Geomancer to look at a card and be like, I don't like that card, put it at the bottom of your deck. You play another card, get to reactivate Geomancer, do it again. Oh, actually, I do like that card, I'll keep that there for when I draw next turn, or maybe it's a good EX burst for when your opponent goes to attack. And Chocolate, so every single time you play a 12 card, you can reactivate Chocolate to then give herself another counter, or destroy yourself another card. And if you are in a tribal 12 deck, it means that you can draw more 12 forwards to then play them onto the field. Obviously, you don't want to play into your opponent's hand too much. If they have got something like a Shantoto in hand, then you don't want to keep on playing too many forwards. But these are nice things that you can slowly accrue over time. Okay, Rosa. She is a 3-cost 7k EX burst. When Rosa enters the field, if you control a card named Cecil, draw 1 card, discard 1 card, draw 1 card. You can only use this ability during your turn and only once per turn, and then teleport, S and Dull, choose any number of characters you control, return them to their owner's hands. You can only use this ability once per turn. So she's got a lot of really cool abilities, and she has a decent EX as well. So, back up Cecil. Easiest way to be able to guarantee the fact you get a card off of playing her, because the chances are backup Cecil will be there for longer than a forward, as backups are traditionally harder to break. Geomancer, again, the fact that you can look at the top card and you don't like that, it then means you could hedge your bets a little bit about using Rosa's discard ability. So before discarding, you can use your Geomancer and be like, oh, actually, yes, I do want that card, then discard the card to get the card to hand, which is useful. Phoenix. So, hey, this is actually more about the fact you get to just discard a card is really useful, because discarding is often only, you can do it through your opponent making you discard through their abilities, or you having to pay for something, but being able to, well, technically you are paying for something by doing this, but being able to just put something or anything into the break zone is really, really useful, especially as the fact that it says discard 1 card. You can discard a dark card or a light card for this, because in the rules they state that you cannot discard light or dark cards for payment of CP, but you're not paying for CP, it's just a parentheses on the actual ability. So you can discard that card and then draw something else. It's just more a case of getting something into the break zone. So say, for example, you discard a Forza into the break zone to draw a card, then you can cast Phoenix to target Forza. With character abilities, you can put the card into the break zone to be able to then bring them onto the field. So hypothetically, you could like discard something or a little 2-cost water forward to then play Lena onto the field. Lena would then bring that forward in. But if you were to discard a forward, say Forza, to pay for Phoenix, that doesn't work. Phoenix wouldn't be able to bring that Forza in. So being able to get that Forza or whatever card you want to use Phoenix to bring into the field is super useful. So yeah, again, Forza and Barrelite as well. So it's just a way to be able to bring in, cheat in multi-element forwards. Golbez. This is a bit of a weird one, but and it's, you know, 4 themes, so there's a lot of 4 synergy in this card. But being able to use Rosa's ability to discard an Archfiend into the break zone without having to pay an ability, because if you're going for all of the Archfiends, then traditionally it's going to be you're going to have some inconsistency in your elements. So even if you have, say, Cagnazzo, but you can't use it to pay for anything, you can just discard him to draw a card, which may help color fix your hand as well. But it also means that Golbez's cost can go down, and what's good about Golbez is that he can become cost 0 and be played onto the field for free. Gilgamesh. So for each card named Gilgamesh in your break zone, Gilgamesh gains 1,000 power. If Gilgamesh has 10,000 power more, Gilgamesh gains Brave and can attack twice his turn, blah 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 blah. Don't care about that. The fact that you can discard a Gilgamesh from your hand into the field at any point is useful. Now I say at any point, draw one card, you're going to use this ability during your turn and only once per turn, but you could hypothetically attack with Gilgamesh just at 9k and your opponent's like, yeah, alright then, and then you discard a Gilgamesh from hand using Rosa's ability, then he can all of a sudden attack again. Ultros. So similar sort of thing with what I've been going is, for when Ultros attacks, deal 2,000 damage and 1,000 more damage for each card named Ultros in your break zone to all the forwards your opponent controls. So the fact that you can just keep on discarding these Ultroses into the break zone, at the moment there aren't a huge amount, there's only this one and the little 2-cost Ultros, but still being able to just discard it into the break zone to just get another card to hand for free effectively means that Ultros will deal much more when he attacks. Luca. So dull, put Luca into the break zone, choose one backup of cost 3 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field. So being able to just discard that backup into the break zone again for then Luca to be able to play it is useful. And again, similar to Phoenix, it's a good way to be able to play something that you don't have the colors for, the elements for. So you may be in water, earth, but say you've got a fire backup for whatever reason, just hypothetically, you could put that into the break zone using Rosa's ability and then use Luca to bring it onto the field to do something. And Shantoto. So using teleport is a really good ability and a good way to be able to get Shantoto back to your hand, but not just Shantoto, your forwards as well. So say you've got Rosa and a couple other forwards on the field and Shantoto in your backup lineup, your opponent's got a massive field as well, use teleport to put all your forwards and Shantoto back into your hand, and the good thing about that is the fact that then you could use the forwards you've put into your hand as the payment for Shantoto to then wipe your opponent's field. Alright, finally, Borghen. He is a 1-cost 9k, the biggest disparity in cost and power in any card yet, I believe. He's from Final Fantasy 2 as well, if you weren't aware. When Borghen is put from the field into the break zone, your opponent selects one forward in their break zone, your opponent adds it to their hand. So, Yuna. If a character is put from the field into the break zone, you may remove it from the game instead. So it basically just means that when Borghen does leave the field for whatever reason, or when he's put into the break zone for whatever reason, you can actually remove him from the game, and it means that your opponent doesn't get a card back from Borghen dying. Puck, if he is in the break zone for whatever reason, say you use him to discard for something, you can play Puck onto the field, and when Puck enters the field, choose one forward of cost 1 in your break zone, play it onto the field. And the fact that it also at damage 3 when Puck enters the field, choose one forward of cost 2 in your break zone as well, play onto the field, can really be useful as well. But the forwards of cost 1 you control gain haste, so Borgen's this big ol' 1 CP forward that also now gains haste. But also, when Bartz forms a party and attacks, you may search for one forward of cost 1 and play it onto the field. So you could just be in mono wind Bobos for all you care, and you party attack with Bartz and Boko, and then you just bring in Borgen. He's now a huge forward that has haste. That's hilarious. Leon. So when Leon enters the field, your opponent gains control of Leon, and when a category 2 character of your opponent enters the field, your opponent gains control of Leon. So obviously you'd want to play Leon first, your opponent gains control of him, then you play Borgen, and then Leon comes back to your side of the field, and then you've just paid 2 CP for an 8k forward and a 9k forward. Now you need to be careful of whenever your opponent plays any 2 or category 2 cards, because, well, category 2 characters, sorry, because the instance they do, they gain control of Leon, so something you need to be wary of. But you know, it can be useful if you want to sack Leon off for a Famfrit play or something like that. Just blocking with Leon can be useful. But either way, be able to pay 2 CP for 2 big boys is pretty good. Phoenix, so choose up to one forward of cost 2 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field, deal 2,000 damage to all the forwards your opponent controls. So the best thing about this Phoenix is it brings in a forward, and they don't come in dull, they come in like standing up. So you can cast Phoenix, deal 2k, bring in Borgen, Borgen then can block if you want on your opponent's attack phase, and Borgen is now effectively blocking for 11k because 2k plus 9k. Yay! Melty Gemini, the coup de grace. So this is the center of a little deck I have at the moment. It's not particularly good, but it's fun. So the idea behind the deck is that you have a lot of forwards that are just naturally big, but you've got Melty Gemini, which stops all your opponent's forwards from getting big, and you shouldn't need to increase the power of your forwards because they're already huge. So stuff like Borghen, Shadow Lord, there's a Dark Knight as well, just all these forwards that naturally have 9,000 power. And Melted Gemini means that your opponent may get walled out because of the fact that you've got bigger forwards than they have, but they can't increase their power, so now they have to start worrying about just outright breaking things or reducing your power, which, you know, if you come up against the right deck, that they may be able to do that, but it's still a bit more niche. Cool. There we are, folks. I hope you enjoyed this week's weird cards, and there were some weird cards in there. But let me know what you thought, and also tell me some of the combos that you guys have been playing. Opus 13 is on the horizon. The Shadowbringers dual set has just released, so I will probably be doing a review of that actually, because there's some interesting cards in there. And there's also been a spoiler for a card in Opus 13 which interacts with your damage zone, which is something I've been wanting for a long time, and looks like we're finally getting it. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video.